Brothers and sisters, in the Gospel of John, in the 3rd chapter, we read these words starting in verse 19. This is the verdict, that the light came into the world, but people preferred darkness to light, because their works were evil. For everyone who does wicked things hates the light and does not come towards the light, for fear that his works be exposed. But whoever lives the truth comes to the light, so that his works may be clearly seen as done in God. This is one of the many passages of Scripture that show us God dividing truth from falsehood, light from darkness, grace from sin, life from death. God divides these things because they don't belong together. They cannot coexist with one another in and of themselves. There must always be a division. And the people of God must take sides. They must decide to act. They must decide to affiliate themselves, to live with and in either the light or the darkness, to defend either the light or the darkness, and to accept the consequences of living in either the light or the darkness. The people of God, just as God himself, must divide the two. And the time has come for us to do that in a most particular way for our brothers and sisters in the womb. The youngest, the smallest, the most defenseless group of human beings on the planet. And they always are in every age, in every circumstance. We have been defending these children in the pro-life effort, calling for the protection of their lives, and now it is time once again for the people of God to decide. Elijah the prophet, if you recall in the first book of Kings in chapter 17, there was a drought, and it talks about Jezebel killing the prophets, and Elijah said, bring all the prophets here, the prophets of Baal, the false gods, and the prophets of the Lord, the true God. And Elijah had a contest between them. Let's see whose God is real. And he asked the prophets of Baal to call on their God, and he called on the Lord God to bring down fire upon the altar. And of course, it was the Lord who responded, because only he is the true God. But Elijah said to the people before this contest ensued, how long are you going to straddle the fence? If the Lord is God, then serve him. If Baal is God, then serve him. But don't try to hold two opinions at the same time. Well, brothers and sisters, we arrive at another such moment, a crossroads, a moment of judgment when the light comes into the world and one has to decide whether he's going to run away from the light lest his deeds be exposed, or go to the light because he loves truth and goodness and God himself. There are various moments in the pro-life effort when what we are trying to say each and every day about the humanity of the unborn, about the reality of the violence of abortion, becomes more clear, more easily accessible to the minds and hearts of the American people. There are various ways that each and every day this reality is brought home to people, because the abortion debate is far too abstract and we risk getting lost in abstractions, and you can justify anything with abstractions and a whole lot of words. But when you connect with the actual people that we're trying to defend and see what the violence of abortion really is, that is what moves the heart and the soul to decide, to stop straddling the fence and to say, I'm going to cast my lot with what is good and what is right and with life. And what do I mean? Day by day, the pro-life movement works to show the images of what an abortion actually is, because when you see the mangled body of an abortion victim, well, then it cuts through the slogans, just like you see when you see the mangled body of a Holocaust victim or of a victim of a drunk driving accident. It cuts through the slogans and the rationalizations, and you know very clearly what kind of decision you need to make. The same thing is true with testimonies. It's one thing to argue in the abstract about women's freedom of choice, but when you see the tears coming down a woman's agonized face as she gives her testimony about how she regrets her abortion, and we do this every day in the Silent No More campaign, then it becomes a little bit easier to see that abortion is not the way to go. The reality of what this is comes home when we have funerals for aborted babies. And I've had the privilege of doing this many times across our country. And once a year, we also have a day, the National Day of Remembrance, when simultaneous services take place at the dozens of grave sites of aborted children around our country. Well, that brings the reality home again to people in a new way, that we're talking about real victims when we speak about these babies. Then there are moments in the pro-life movement, my friends, when this concrete reality of the victims is exposed on a grand scale. Think back a few years ago to the trial of Philadelphia abortionist Kermit Gosnell. At first, the media was quite slow to pick up on it, but eventually there was some substantial coverage, and people heard about the gruesome conditions in his abortion clinic, his house of horrors as it came to be known. And people heard also about the late-term abortions he performed, and even about the babies who came out of their mothers alive before he killed them outside the womb. This was a moment of revelation. The light came into the world. People had to choose either to embrace life or to continue to hide their dark deeds. And now we have another such moment as videos are being released, undercover videos of showing the activity of abortion in Planned Parenthood facilities, showing the fact that they harvest and sell these body parts, and showing some of the body parts. Again, a clear revelation that cuts through slogans, cuts through abstractions, gets to the core of the human heart and soul and conscience, and brings us to a fork in the road. Let's take a look a little more closely at what that fork in the road is. When you see the violence of abortion, when you hear the procedure described, when you hear of the reality of the sale of the brains and the heart, the livers and the lungs. Brothers and sisters, human nature, the human conscience, when faced with this kind of violence, screams out in protest. It says, no, this is wrong, this must not be allowed, this has to stop. There is an inner voice of protest, as clear as day. And we all hear it. It is the voice of conscience. It is the voice of our own mind evaluating that a particular act is in fact so wrong that it must not be done and it must not be tolerated. When that voice of protest arises within us, then we are at the kind of fork in the road that John's Gospel describes when it talks about the very coming of Jesus, the light coming into the world. Well, people then had to make a decision because it was clear which way was right, which way was wrong. And so when that voice of protest arises within us, as we see abortion, as we hear the description, as the reality cuts through the fog of the slogans and the rationalizations, then here's the choice. Either that voice of protest gets translated into action, or it gets suppressed by excuses. That's our choice. People will translate that voice of protest into concrete action to start speaking up against abortion, getting involved in the pro-life movement, reaching out to help those who are pregnant and in need, joining the team of their pro-life organization in their parish, in their school, in their community, at their pregnancy center, doing something to save lives, praying at an abortion facility, getting involved in legislative and political activity, all the wide variety of activities in the pro-life movement. That voice of protest arising within a person who comes face to face with the reality of abortion is the engine that gets people involved and ready to join the cause. But what's the alternative to that? The alternative to that is that we quiet the voice of protest. Yes, inside of us something is saying, no, this is wrong, this must stop. And then we kind of take our hand and we pat that voice down and we say, oh, don't worry, it's not really that bad. And then we make some kind of excuse as to why we don't translate that voice into action. Some kind of excuse. Saying it's really not as bad as it sounds, or nobody else is getting involved, we don't have to, or it would be too much risk or too much trouble to get involved, or really it's not my responsibility, or whatever the excuse might be. And if we push down, if we suppress, if we muzzle that voice of protest with one excuse, then we have to make another excuse after that as to why we didn't respond. And then we have to make another excuse after that with every passing day. And brothers and sisters, eventually we don't hear that voice anymore. We silence it within ourselves. And then it takes another strong impulse to awaken it. And it may be a while before that voice gets awakened again, because we come face to face with what abortion is. In my book, Abolishing Abortion, I write about a collision course that we have to foster, that we have to increase in our society. It's the collision between, and let me just quote from this book, the normal human antipathy towards gruesome violence on the one hand, and the ideological approval of abortion on the other. To break the impasse over abortion, we must compel the collision with all its pain, with all its attendant friction, collateral damage, and anxiety. In fact, we need to increase the speed and force of that collision. Although collision is inevitable, our human nature does everything it can to postpone the moment of impact, and more damage is done in the meantime. When a video comes out showing Planned Parenthood personnel sifting through the hearts and the lungs and the brains of these babies and talking about it and saying, oh, it's another boy. When they talk about babies coming out intact, the voice of protest is awakened. And it's not pleasant. And that's the collision course between people thinking that abortion is some kind of benign reality or justifying it somehow and being comfortable in that assertion, and hitting up against that with the gruesome reality of what abortion is. That's painful, that's uncomfortable, that causes all kinds of turmoil. And yet it is in every movement that tries to uproot a deeply embedded social evil. It is in every movement that tries to do that, that there must be that collision, that there must be that tension. You remember Dr. Martin Luther King's letter from the Birmingham jail in which he talks about this very phenomenon. And he says, people are complaining about us. We're troublemakers. We're inciting violence. We're creating tension. He says, I'm not afraid of the word tension. He says, only when this evil is exposed to the light of human conscience can it be dealt with. That is what we are dealing with here and now today. And that's what we continue to deal with in the pro-life effort as we show what abortion is, as we bring people face to face with the wounds of our aborted brothers and sisters and the wounds of their moms and their dads. And we have a little window here, my friends. A little window when the voice of protest is arising in the hearts and minds of many of our fellow citizens, most of whom who have never seen an abortion before, have never heard a description of it, and certainly don't know the evils that Planned Parenthood is doing. But now, They've been a little bit awakened. It's like somebody who is slumbering, and in the midst of that slumber, some kind of bright light causes them to raise their head and open their eyes, even if just a little bit. But it's only a short window in which to rouse them to action before they slip back into that slumber. And so now I am calling upon you, all of you in the sound of my voice, to rise up to the power of this moment and to help, to take the hands and to help your fellow citizens and help your family members and help your co-workers and help your fellow worshipers in your church to rise up and to convert that voice of protest into action for the great cause of life. Now is an opportunity. One of those opportunities, like the Kermit Gosnell trial was, and like other moments in our movement are, now is again a moment for us to rise up and to take action. Pope Francis gave a homily in which he spoke the following words just a few months after he was elected. This was from a sermon of July 3rd of 2013. Pope Francis says, "We find Jesus' wounds in carrying out works of mercy, giving to our body, the soul too, but I stress the body of your wounded brother, because he is hungry, because he is thirsty, naked, humiliated, a slave." Those are the wounds of Jesus today. We need to touch the wounds of Jesus. We need to bind the wounds. We may need to caress the wounds of Jesus with tenderness. We need to kiss the wounds of Jesus, and this literally, the Pope goes on to say. Just think of what happened to St. Francis when he embraced the leper. The same thing that happened to Thomas. His life changed. And now is the moment when the lives of so many of our fellow citizens can change if we enable them to see and then embrace the wounds of our aborted brothers and sisters, to read about, to hear about, to see these bodies and these body parts that are being harvested and sold, and the evil of the selling of the body parts flows directly from the evil of killing those bodies in the first place. Brothers and sisters, what is at the heart of this message is that these children are killed in the first place. So now it is time. Now it is time for those of you who, like me, have the privilege of ministering and preaching the gospel. If we have not spoken up loudly and clearly about abortion in the past, now is the time to begin doing it. Now is the time for those in public office to exercise your responsibility to protect life, your responsibility to bring an end to the unscrupulous, illegal, immoral practices of abortion clinics, and to advance the actual protection in law of the right to life of our brothers and sisters in the womb. And there are many different opportunities for doing that as we move forward. Now is the time for you who have had abortions to bravely face that pain and face that wound and know that we are on your side, because we are issuing an even greater and stronger call for healing and mercy and forgiveness as we come closer and closer to what the church will celebrate as a year of mercy. Know that you are not alone, and that this is the time not to hide that pain and bury it, but to bring it forward, face it, let it be healed, and then share with others. Share with others the strength that they need to choose life rather than to go down the path that you took and that hurts so much. Now is the time for you, in whatever state of life you are, whatever vocation you have, who perhaps have been afraid to get involved in the pro-life effort. Now is the time to do something, to connect within your parish, within your community, within your school. Connect with us. We will help you. I will help you to get involved in the pro-life movement. Now is the time, brothers and sisters, for those of you who have thought that abortion is just one of many issues. For those of you who perhaps have put more focus on questions of the poor and world peace and immigration and the environment, these are all important issues. But they are important only because life is important. They are important only because the people affected by poverty and by immigration and by the environment have in fact the right to life. And so now is the time to put once again into focus that direct attacks on the right to life by abortion are the number one priority when it comes to what problems we need to solve in the world and what moral causes we need to connect with. This is number one and will always be number one. Because every other right we have depends and will always depend on life itself. And so now is the time to cut through the fog and the confusion that would put every issue on some kind of morally equal plane and realize instead, as our bishops have declared in that document, Living the Gospel of Life from 1998, that all these different issues of social justice, all these concerns and these causes that we embrace, rightfully so, about health care and education and poverty and hunger and war and peace, that this is like a house, that there are the crossbeams and the roofs and the windows and the walls, but that the right to life is the foundation of that house. And brothers and sisters, unless we rise up now, and we speak up and we act to protect the children in the womb from the violence that would dismember them, then on all these other issues and causes we will be building on quicksand. We will not be able to create a society that welcomes the immigrant coming over our borders if we can't even welcome the child coming across the border of the womb. We will not be able to create a society that wants to feed the hungry and end poverty if we can't feed the hungry child inside the womb. We will not be able to create a society that protects the life even of the criminal and abolishes the death penalty if we can't protect the life of the innocent and abolish abortion. We will not be able to create a world that is free from the violence of terrorism and promotes international harmony if we can't preserve the harmony between a mother and her own child. Now is the moment. Now is the moment for those of you, my colleagues in the pro-life movement, for us to join together as never before, for us to collaborate together more strongly than ever, for us to put aside petty differences and grievances, look one another in the eye and say we need each other. We need each other as individuals, our organizations need each other, and we must build up the unity of this movement, because in that unity, under God's grace, is our strength, and that's the path to victory. Working together because God has placed each of us in this movement in a particular position with particular gifts for particular reasons. And unless all the cylinders of this engine that God has put together are functioning to their fullest, we will not get to the goal. But to the goal we must get. To those of you who are younger in the movement and newer in this cause, this is not a task that we are entrusting to you as if we are going to retire, those of us who have been in the movement for a long time. What we are saying to you as not future leaders of the pro-life effort, but leaders today, is take our hand, because together we will go into the promised land. Together we will enter the victory for our unborn brothers and sisters. Brothers and sisters, now is that time, now is that moment. Let's take hold of God's grace. Let's take hold of one another. And as light comes into the world and into our own consciences and into the consciences of all our brothers and sisters, let us choose that light. Let's not run away from it in fear, because our deeds are not evil, that we should be afraid that they are exposed. It is the deeds of Planned Parenthood, it is the deeds of the abortion industry, it is the deeds of the enemies of the gospel that are evil. But you and I have nothing to fear, because we take refuge in the mercy and the truth of God. And although we are sinners, we know that that light has come to lift us up and to save us, and through us to save the world and to save our youngest brothers and sisters, those yet in the womb. Lord, thank you for that light. Thank you for this moment of opportunity. May we and all your people choose well. May we choose wisely. May we choose you. Amen.